Sounds good. Well, my name is Cindy Kleckner, and I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. And I always like to put in a little plug for my profession. To become a dietitian, generally you go through 4 years of college, and then you have to do an internship. And many times it's attached to a master's program or it's a coordinated undergraduate program. I've been a dietitian over 40 years, and that's what brought me to Texas, actually. I came to Texas to do my internship at Presbyterian Hospital, and it's generally a 12-month program, and we go through clinical, so we do rotations at all the different hospitals. We also get an introduction to food service management, community, like WIC programs. So my program was very general, and it was a great program, because it kind of gave me an introduction, but I kept getting called to come to culinary, but I never wanted to become a chef. And it took probably 20 years before I really found my home in what I like to do. And I like to say that I like to promote the science of nutrition with the art of culinary. And it's really connecting the dots to show people how to, what to do with nutrition and how to be healthy. So, it goes hand in hand. A lot of people just eat because that's the way they always have eaten. And it's really important to really understand the science. And what I like to talk about in my class, I teach in the culinary program, and I've been teaching since the program started, actually. It was in the early 2000s. And it's one class, and all the majors are required to take it. It's called Nutrition and Menu Planning. And it's just a toe dipping because it's just a 16-week class, but it really gives people an introduction and also an appreciation, for what they might encounter when they're in culinary. But so as a dietitian, I've worked in hospitals. I have my own business. I have a consulting business, and I've done a lot of public speaking, a lot of corporate wellness. So companies got really, they made it very important to teach their employees about how to be healthy, to save on insurance. So I would go in and do a lot of programs for various corporations, a lot of high profile corporations. And every time I mentioned what I love to do, they always said, come on, do a culinary program for us. And then probably about, I think it was in 2006, I have always been affiliated with the Cooper Aerobic Center in Dallas. It was one of my first jobs, working with Ken Cooper. And I got really into wellness because I felt like it was hard to teach people how to be healthy after they've already been sick. Let's work on prevention. And Dr. Cooper actually started a second facility in McKinney. And inside the fitness center, he actually built a teaching kitchen. So for 14 years, I actually ran the kitchen, and I taught all the members. We started out teaching members of the fitness center who were interested in nutrition. And then it became a really nice community effort. And it grew, the program grew from just doing a little simple demo to doing kitchen boot camps for adults, for teenagers. And then I also did corporate team building events. So we would have companies come in and do an offsite meeting in our meeting room. And then at lunchtime, they would come in the kitchen and we would do a demo. And what I found was teaching nutrition, making it fun, I called it fun-education, made it so much more applicable for people, because when you say nutrition, everyone conjures up a certain idea, sometimes it's negative, right? If I say we're going to eat healthy today or we're going to eat balanced today, a lot of people think that it's going to taste like cardboard. And I was really out to prove everybody wrong. So we had a lot of fun doing that. They closed the kitchen, it's been several years now, but it's been really exciting. During that time, I created a lot of my own recipes when I was in the teaching kitchen. And my first opportunity to use them was a book called the Hypertension Cookbook for Dummies, which actually was a collaboration with another dietitian. And it was a program called The Dash, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But this particular colleague was looking for somebody who could develop recipes. So we collaborated. She wrote a lot of the text. I created the recipes. And that was about 150 recipes in like 2011. It was a pretty successful book. But what we found was a lot of people didn't know what the word hypertension meant. So the publisher, Wiley and Sons, they asked us to write a second book. And then since then, I've written a third book, which we'll be raffling off tonight. It's called The DASH Diet for Dummies. And I really love this format because it's so simple and it really helps people really understand, and it has a lot of practical tips. So the DASH diet is something, the DASH diet is something that is very, very pertinent. It's very relevant. And it's very timely, even though it was created in a lab in the medical profession. It's been 24 years. And it was the National Institutes of Health decided that we have a lot of high blood pressure in our country, and what can we do to change that without medication? And they came up with foods that have certain nutrients, calcium, potassium, and magnesium. And what they found was it was a food pattern that made a difference with high blood pressure. It wasn't taking a pill for magnesium or calcium. So when I teach nutrition, my whole goal in life is really to put a positive spin. And that's what DASH is. DASH is not about eliminating. It's about what can I do to make things healthier. I had a client yesterday. He was a 320-pound male, and his doctor said, you have fatty liver, you have prediabetes. He already was on high blood pressure medication. He has hyperlipidemia. You know, his doctor said, you've got to see a dietitian. He said, it's not about, I love this doctor. It's not about elimination. It's about teaching people how to manage what they eat, because you're coming from a different background than you are, and everybody eats a little different. So we have to honor that. So that's really the number one goal. So this is just a little bit about, you know, what I do, what I've done. But it's really important to start thinking about how am I going to manage this when I dine out? Because people spend typically more than 50% of their food dollar eating out. So we have to really think about what kind of changes can we make. When I look at the obesity rates in our country over the last, 40 years, we didn't spend as much eating out before than we do now, and we have high rates of obesity. So it's something we have to really think about. So dine in, dine out, that's the question. There's a lot of decisions to be made when we think about the timing. In the 1950s, when you think about what people ate, it was generally more of a whole food diet. It was a lot higher in fiber, and also consequently higher in starch. Not as much fat. People had a little bit, we managed our weight a little bit better. And then we also did a lot more labor-intensive work. So people were a little bit more active and fit. Now, if you look at the percentage of fat that people are eating, it's really quite high, and it's primarily because of all the fried foods, the sauces, the gravies, and all that. And it's not that people have to totally eliminate, but we have to really understand what we're doing and what we need to do to really make some improvements, in our country. Because if you look at all the chronic disease that we have, a lot of it is related to our diet. We have cardiovascular disease is still the number one, cause of death in our country. A lot of cancer, a lot of gastrointestinal issues, a lot of gut issues are directly related to nutrition. So when we think about it, we need to eat less fat, less saturated fat. We need to have a lot more produce. Again, I want to put a positive spin on this. We need more whole grains. Most people are only getting about 9 grams of fiber a day, and we probably need anywhere from 25 to 35 grams a day, depending on your, personal calorie level. So you can see how, if you add more produce, you're taking care of nutrients, antioxidants, phytochemicals, you're taking care of fiber. Same thing with whole grains. And what I mean by that is more of the grain that any grain that has all of the components. If I look at a grain of wheat, when I say whole, I'm referring to the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. If I take the bran away and take the germ away, all I have left is the endosperm, and that's how they make white flour. And there's not really any fiber in there. There's not really, a lot of the nutrients are stripped, and when it comes to products that you purchase at the grocery store, a lot of those have been they've been added back in. So we have a lot of things that we can do. When we look at the rates of obesity, I just updated this the other day. The last time I had updated it, it was 71%, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And that's overweight and obese adults over 20. And then, of course, children. This is what's most alarming, is that we have more adult onset diabetes or type 2 diabetes as a result of our children having so many problems with this. So we don't even call it adult onset anymore. We call it type 2 diabetes because children are getting diabetes at an earlier age. So it's really concerning. So let's look at this. When you try to understand what kind of changes we need to make, we have to look at where we're at right now. And in the very center is where we need to be. So you can see our intake of vegetables and fruits are very low. Our grains, they're higher, but generally the whole grains are a lot lower. Dairy is really well below the lower limit or the recommended limit. Dairy is another food group that is picked on by the popular press. When we talk about certain nutrition items, there's a lot of things that go on in the popular press that aren't really based in science. And that's why when you're in my class, I always say we want to seek reliable nutrition information. And that means that you have to look at peer-reviewed articles, and you have to, go to resources where you're going to get legitimate information. Protein foods, most people are getting enough. But when we eat our protein, a lot of times people are choosing fattier protein choices. So that can be a problem. Look at the sugars, added sugars, not things like fruit or fruit juice that gives us, natural fructose, but things that are added to our food that don't necessarily have to be there, like cereals or, soft drinks and things like that. And I want to make a blanket statement. I don't mean to pick on any industry, the restaurant industry, the soft drink industry at all. I'm just merely pointing out, what the facts are. Sodium, if you watch the news this morning, the Surgeon General says, we really need to crack down on our sodium intake. We eat so many highly processed foods that we're automatically getting more sodium in our diet than we really need to. Consequently, blood pressure goes up. Anytime you have a lot of sodium, you're going to retain fluid. And when you have increased volume within your blood vessels, you have a tendency to have a higher blood pressure. Over time, it puts a lot of pressure on the sides of the artery walls, and that can create more issues with stroke and other heart disease. So it's really important to think about what we need to be doing. But there's a lot of confusion. Just talk to your neighbor. Seems like every year there's something new that surfaces. Right now the ketogenic diet is really popular. And really that's just an extension of the old Atkins diet. Cut way down on your carbohydrates, increase your protein. If you're on a true keto diet, you're not really getting more than about a half a banana a day in terms of carbs. And your body requires carbohydrates for fuel. It's the body's best available fuel. And it's the only fuel for your brain and your central nervous system. So when a person's cutting carbohydrates out of their diet, they're really not getting the nutrients they need. They're not getting the fiber they need. So what you don't hear when people end up with these, more trendy diets is that they have issues related to constipation. They have issues related to kidney stones because of excess protein. They have a lot of elevated blood lipids because they're getting too much saturated fat. So it's really important to, understand where to get this reliable nutrition information. Anything that has a .edu after it or a .gov is going to be a pretty good source. So there's a lot of confusion. Now, this is one thing that has been used over the course of the last 35 years. It has evolved into from different formats. When I was a young dietitian, we had the 10 basic food groups, and then it morphed into the 4 basic food groups, and then the food guide pyramid, and now we have what we call My Plate. And I personally love this format because it's a visual and it really gives us some insight into what we need. People are always going to debate, different foods, different nutrients, but the reality is there's no such thing as a perfect food. So if you're eliminating a whole group, like dairy, for instance, and a lot of people, put a negative spin on dairy, you're not getting calcium that you could be. You're not getting the vitamin D. Vitamin D comes with calcium in milk. Vitamin D is it unlocks your body's ability to use calcium. So if you're eliminating this, you can make up for it by eating some greens or beans to get calcium, but you have to eat so much of it that you're going to eat more than your calorie allowance. So when we talk about nutrition, it's all about balance. And that's why when they redid this, as you can see on the screen, every plate, whether it's a meal or a snack, should have a little bit of protein. It should have a little bit of grain. And then the rest of the plate should be full of color. And if you wanted to see that in actually a format that has actual pictures, protein, most people don't have a problem getting enough, but a lot of times we eat more than our share. If you go out to lunch at a restaurant, you're going to get anywhere from 6 to 8 ounces of protein. If you go out for dinner, it may be 8 to 12 ounces. And for the most part, even, people that have a higher muscle mass that are doing, weight training, you probably don't need more than 8 to 10 ounces a day. We need anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So we have a lot of guidance for people who want individual information. Now, one thing that I didn't mention that I wanted to make perfectly clear was when I speak to groups like this, it's about healthy eating. Now, some of you may have issues with cardiovascular disease. Some people may have diabetes, and your diet would need to be tailored accordingly. But the suggestions that I'm making today are really more for, healthy people and keeping us healthy. So this is a really good way to plan your meals. There's a lot of really good apps out there that kind of give you that guidance. There's so many of them really, but Choose My Plate is the government website that gives you a ton of information. And for anybody who's interested, I printed off a few, like what's cooking, how to save more at the grocery store if you're doing budget shopping, how to choose food in the dining hall if you're on a campus, shopping for fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of really good practical information on that website that I highly recommend. And it really gives good solid information that you're going to be able to use because it gives you specifics. It doesn't just, talk high level nutrition. So when we're dining out, there's a lot of challenges, right? And it's not that you shouldn't dine out. It's that we need to kind of get in a certain mindset before we eat out so that we know what to choose. There's a lot of solutions. Like number one is just planning ahead. If I'm hungry for fish, the last place I want to go is a place that only has fried fish with fried hush puppies and fried French fries or fried onion rings. That doesn't give me enough variety. So it's really important to plan ahead and kind of look to see what that restaurant offers so that you can kind of get into a mindset of what to choose. You want to read the menu carefully. Many times you can have what you want, but maybe change up the sides a little bit so that you're not overdoing the fat, so that you're getting a little bit more balance. 9 times out of 10, when you're eating out, we can all stand to probably get a lot more veggies. Veggies are always the answer. You always want to watch your portion. And this is an example of what a restaurant meal would look like, as opposed to all we need. So you can do a lot of things like, just watch where you eat, like watch buffets. Obviously, the more you pack on your plate, the more calories you're going to consume. There was a study done that showed if you have access to any of your grandmother's dinner plates, they were generally about 9 inches. And now we're eating off of 11-inch dinner plates. If you pack it full with food, you can eat anywhere from 400 to 600 extra calories a day, just as a result of using a bigger plate. So you have to watch out for these kinds of things. Unlimited bread baskets. There's nothing wrong with bread. You know, I love bread. In fact, when I think about it, my grandmother made the best homemade bread with real butter, and it's still a treat for me, but I can't have an unlimited amount. You know, I have to decide, is it going to be the bread? Is it going to be another starch? Do I really want to use my fat that way? It's all about balancing and managing. When we go to restaurants where they have freebies, like the chip basket, you know, you can consume your whole day's worth of calories before you even get your meal. So these are things that we just need to think about. Foods that are prepared with a lot of fat. Unfortunately, the things that we all love, anything cheesy, anything creamy, you know, anything crunchy, anything fried, those are really going to have a lot of fat in them. Fat, because of the nature of the nutrient, it gives you 2.5 times the calories of any other food. Now, you hear me talking about calories, and you probably think, oh, she probably knows the calorie content of everything. I'm not a big calorie counter, but I do know that fat is 2.5 times the calories of protein and carb. So when I add fat to my food, or if I prepare food in a manner where it has more fat, it's going to be a lot more calories. So you can do a lot of different things here by either substituting, eating less. Another item is like, watch the size of your meat, because generally, you know, when you eat out, a lot of times restaurants plan the meal around the protein. So the protein is going to be the centerpiece, and then there's a little this and a little of that. We need to try to think differently and have the protein be the side dish. Now, if you have a situation like you mentioned that you're doing like weight training, you have to eat accordingly. You know, that's the thing to remember. It's everyone has a certain budget of calories that they get based on, are they male or female? How much muscle mass, how much body fat, you know, how active you are. Think about the Olympic athletes. I'm always amazed when I hear that some of the swimmers are eating 8,000 to 10,000 calories a day. Don't we just wish, right? But think about how muscle bound they are. They're like a furnace. They are, you know, burning calories so efficiently. So we have to really, you know, eat according to how we're, you know, how our body is and how active we are. Some of these desserts that we get in restaurants, you know, you can get 1,600 calorie dessert. You know, that would be my total daily allowance of calories. So it's always really important. People are really into going to some of the coffee places, the drive-through coffee places that have creamy drinks, some of the slushies, some of the smoothies. And I think it's real easy for students sometimes to get into that trap as well, because you're on the go, you're on the run, you're not thinking about meal prep, and sometimes people just grab a smoothie. But so many times they're just like a dessert. And then, of course, we have our soft drinks. Okay. Does anybody know how many teaspoons of sugar or how many grams of sugar are in an average size soft drink?
53.
I'm sorry?
53.
53. There's about 40 grams of sugar, and 4 grams equals a teaspoon. So there's about 10 teaspoons of sugar in a can of soft drink. Okay. Sugar never hurt anybody. You know, 1 teaspoon of sugar is 16 calories. But if I pour a soft drink and I'm getting 10 teaspoons of sugar in one beverage, you know, I don't think I could drink an iced tea if it had 10 teaspoons of sugar, you know, but we golf down the soft drinks and don't even think about it. So, whoops. So you have to really be cautious to kind of see, can you really afford that big gulp? You know, is it really worth it? I had a patient who was nursing a back injury, and he was having 8 to 10 Dr. Peppers a day when normally he didn't have it, and he gained 55 pounds in 6 months. So some of these things are just a real easy fix. So water is always your best choice, you know, especially living in the South, especially the kind of climate we have. It helps to aid in digestion. It keeps our core temperature regulated. You know, it keeps our belly full if we need to, you know, fill up on something. If we're trying to cut calories, it helps to circulate those nutrients. So it's really, really important to, you know, to really think about your choices, because we all get into certain habits, and it's important to just kind of sit back and maybe make some changes. When you read the menu, you want to look at the description. You know, it might be totally off base of what you're thinking. So my husband always laughs when I go to a restaurant, because I always want to know the detail about everything to make the best decision. You want to look at the ingredients, and maybe if it's a very rich meal, maybe you want to split, you know, or maybe you want to take half home for later, you know, and have it the next day for a meal. So there's a lot of strategy. Choose healthy more often, or balanced, and that's grilled, steamed, broiled, poached, stir-fried, baked, roasted. All those are keys that it's going to be a little bit more balanced. What did I do? And then, of course, our less balanced, like I mentioned, crispy, creamy, crunchy, you know, any of those kind of fun words, au gratin. These two slides here, I just stuck in there just to show people, if you're trying to lighten up, 9 times out of 10, it has to do with the cream and the whole milk and the cheeses and all that. And you can really make a big difference if you're cooking for yourself by just really cutting back on some of those ingredients. And my culinary majors always get so upset because that's what they do in lab, you know, it's all about the cream and the salt. I cook that way as well, but it's not as often. You know, if I'm cooking for the mother-in-law or the Queen of England, I'm going to pull out all the stops, right? But if I'm cooking every day, I can't afford to eat that way. That's when I lighten up. So you can reduce fat in so many different ways. Like if you're making a broth or a soup, you can always put it in the refrigerator, wait till the fat rises and skim it off. You can choose leaner cuts of meat. You can trim the fat off of your meat. You could even, you know, choose seafood as opposed to, you know, high fat meats. So there's a lot of strategy. Reducing portions. The meat on your plate generally shouldn't be bigger than the palm of your hand. Okay, that's for people who need anywhere from 1,500 to maybe 2,200 calories. If you're one of those lucky people that get a lot more, you can maybe have more, or maybe you're going to split it up and have some meals and snacks throughout the day where you're going to get more protein. The cheese component is, you know, they say people from Wisconsin are cheeseheads, Americans are cheeseheads. You know, think about the McDonald's fry. Back in the day, there was a small order of fries, and then it grew to a medium, and then a large, and then we started melting cheese on our fries, and then we started putting chili, and then we dip it in ranch dressing. So it's fat, fat, and more fat, and we just sort of are hardwired that way. So just be cautious of that. When it comes to any of the sauces or dressings, drizzle, don't drench. It's very easy. You know, watch out for some of the high fat ingredients. When you're baking, there's a lot of things you can do, like prune puree, or mash up bananas, or use applesauce when you're baking. You don't have to follow the recipe exactly. So, you know, that's reducing fat. And I don't like to belabor that point because I think we all think that way. We have to reduce fat. It's really important to look at what you're doing and how you can make a change. Some people are already reducing fat, so that's not the answer. Some people may need to add a lot more produce, okay? And that's an easy fix. For people who don't like, especially vegetables, I always say, come to my kitchen, you know, and that's you culinary student, it's the same thing. Teach people about roasting, you know, generating a lot of flavor from cooking techniques. What can you do to add flavor? Flavored vinegars, herbs and spices. You know, there's just a ton of things that you can do. When I grew up, my mother boiled everything, right? There's nothing worse than a broiled Brussels sprout, right? Or broiled asparagus, boiled. But now we know how to really make food taste good. So that's really important. And you'll notice on this slide that I put on there that you don't have to just have fresh, okay? So the one thing that I despise is when we start talking about elitist nutrition, right? It's not about organic and non-GMO, and it's not about getting, you know, fresh. It's about eating produce any way you can afford it. Because I've been to a lot of farm tours, and 2 years ago I went to a tomato and peach harvest where we actually followed from the combine. We actually rode the combine with the farmers all the way to the canning. And that produce is in a can within 4 hours. That means that it's picked at peak ripeness, and it's in that can. And what people don't realize, especially with tomatoes, is you're actually getting better nutrition because of the density of the nutrient and the extra beta carotene. So, never discount frozen, canned, and also vegetable juice. So that's also very important. Same thing with fruit and fruit juices. Frozen, canned, dried, it's all good. It's all really, really important. The other thing that I've mentioned over and over is how we can add flavor, without salt. Because as a Surgeon General has talked, it's become, a real detriment to society. And primarily because we eat so many highly processed foods. Okay. When I use that word, I sometimes catch myself because milk is processed, right? Canned goods are processed. But what I'm referring to are things that normally were a whole food, and now we're eating out of boxes and we're opening up a lot of packages. And again, step up culinary majors, and we need to teach people how easy it is to cook and how to prepare food from the whole version. And that's really all this is. It's about eating whole food, food that comes from the earth. When you cook with salt, a lot of people say, well, you need salt for flavor. But think of all the other things that you can use, like citrus zest. You can use flavored vinegars, flavored oils. You can, really match a really wonderful cooking technique to get the flavor. So we really have to focus on that a little bit more. And think about our friends in different places. When I think about, when I used to have my teaching kitchen, I like to teach different cuisine, primarily because if you think about food from other countries, they really do a great job generating flavor. So if I gave each of you a piece of chicken, I bet every one of you would come up with a different dish. And then before you know it, all 10 of us or 12 of us have all these different ideas. And that's really, my idea of teaching people about cooking. But if you look at all the different cuisine, you end up coming up with different flavors, different options, and using whole food. So you can see here, some of them may be a little bit higher in sodium than others. We just have to, make allowances for that. Even when I created my book, if I had a recipe that was higher in sodium, what do? I add a lower sodium side dish to it. Or I watch the sodium that I'm eating the rest of the day, and then all of a sudden it's balanced out. So I'm not as, I don't put myself in jeopardy. Another thing is to add more fiber. This gentleman that I talked about yesterday, he knew very little about nutrition. And I said to myself, there's one thing that he needs in his diet, nothing else. The biggest message was adding fiber. If you're not eating fruit and vegetables, if you're not getting whole grains, you're not getting near the fiber, because dairy provides no fiber at all. Meat, chicken, fish, none of that provides fiber, dietary fiber. And you need fiber to keep your gut working healthy. You need it for good digestion. And when you eat foods that have a lot more fiber, like whole grains, like nuts, all of a sudden you're getting a wider variety of nutrients, and you're getting antioxidants and phytochemicals. And these are words that are sort of new over the 40 years that I've been a dietitian. And all they are compounds that keep our body healthy from the inside out. So when I eat foods that have whole grains like nuts, back in the 80s, a lot of you are younger, you don't remember this, but everybody was walking around with fat gram counters because fat was the evil nutrient, right? So nuts were out of the question. Well, that's the beauty of science. We change when we learn more. And now we promote nuts because it's a great source of fat, it has fiber, and there's antioxidants. The best way to describe an antioxidant is if I take an apple and I take a big bite out of it and set it on the counter, what happens to it? Yeah. Yeah, it starts to turn brown because it oxidizes. But if I take some lemon juice or another citrus fruit, pour it on there, it prevents it from turning brown. And that's what an antioxidant is. So when you're eating foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, you're getting the benefit of that antioxidant from the inside out. Now, it's going to protect you, but is it 100%? You never know. You never know what we are, we're all prone to having some sort of issue. My father died at 33 of a massive heart attack. So from the get-go, I have that strike against me, right? So I have to be even a little bit more cautious because I have it in my genetic makeup. So, it's really important to know what you need to do for yourself to keep yourself healthy. Sugar, kind of gets a bad rap. And like I mentioned before, if you have a teaspoon of sugar in your iced tea or coffee, it never really harmed anybody. But if you start having multiple soft drinks a day, or if you have added sugar in a lot of the products that you're eating, it adds up really easily because even condiments have a lot of sugar, like ketchup and, things like that. So it's good to start reducing or eliminating sugar by learning what, spices are going to contribute that flavor. The use of vanilla, the use of allspice, nutmeg, cinnamon. So, the idea here is a teaspoon of sugar is not bad. It's just how much are we getting? So it's important to look at that. The dietary guidelines for Americans suggest that we need to limit our added sugar to no more than 10% of our calories per day. So if you're eating, 2,000 calories, that means that you should limit your added sugar to 200 calories, right? So what is an average soft drink? 150. An average candy bar? 250. An average piece of dessert at a restaurant? 350 to 1,500. Okay, so that's what's happening with the sugar. It's not that we should demonize sugar, and we shouldn't demonize sugar substitutes either. It's all about moderation mentality, So again, I think we just have to keep it realistic. When it comes to, what are you going to do about it? Maybe you're going to take control of your health and start cooking more. There's a lot of help out there. I just put down a few cookbooks that are kind of easy. It's really important to think about shortcuts because we're all busy. We don't want to take the time to shop and all that. But there's a lot of things that you can buy that are like pre-prepared, like already chopped up vegetables. You can even buy Uncle Ben's brown rice in a packet with no added salt. All you do is snap it open, put it in the microwave for 90 minutes, voila, you're eating in seconds. It's so good. And it's very healthy. It's a whole grain. So, use those shortcuts when you can. I put some really simple ideas up here, and not that they're that exciting, but you can do a lot. A baked potato. People demonize potatoes all the time, but think about how much vitamin C, and if you eat the skin, you're getting fiber. Add some more broccoli to it, and maybe instead of sour cream, add some plain unflavored yogurt, or add some cottage cheese, or maybe some salsa, which gives you a lot of wonderful flavor. So that's an idea. Or take some whole wheat tortillas or a flatbread and, make some sort of pizza out of vegetables. You can go and get a roasted chicken and eat it as a roasted chicken without the skin, maybe one night. Then make a salad out of it, or, put it in a wrap sandwich. I mean, there's just a lot of things you can do with roasted chicken. Same thing with fish. Fish is so good because as a protein source, it's not only giving you equal amounts of protein that other protein foods do, but you may get the benefit of the omega-3 fatty acids, which is very beneficial for heart health, for brain health. So fish is awesome. Pasta, people like to demonize pasta. And again, it's not the pasta itself, it's what are we doing with it? How much of it are we eating? Are we going for the never-ending pasta bowl? That may be an issue. But if it has red sauce or a clam sauce as opposed to an Alfredo, or, you know, a cream sauce, you know, you're so much better off. Oops. That's my fault. So, help. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Stir frying is one of my favorite things to do. I always have my wok on the stove because you can take a small amount of protein, chop it up, and the average person who is in love with a big piece of meat is never going to miss it because you chop it up really small, add a bunch of vegetables to go with, and you know, you end up having a full, wonderful meal. Serve it with some brown or whole grain rice or farro or quinoa, and all of a sudden you have a really healthy meal. I like to do this thing. I used to do culinary demos related to it. It was like mixing and matching. So I put together this chart. There we go. So there's a lot of different things that you can buy, like bento boxes and containers. And this one was just to show you, they even had a built-in spoon and fork. You can get these kinds of things at Bed Bath & Beyond. They also have a little section in there where you can put salad dressing. So when you're ready to eat, you just open the salad dressing, shake it up. You have a nice, wonderful salad. And so I put together these little charts that say, here's your green. What do you want to put in as far as vegetables, proteins, add-ins? What kind of salad dressing do you want? Or maybe no dressing. And just kind of mix and match. Do the same thing with sandwiches. You know, do you want a whole grain wrap? Do you want an English muffin? Do you want a ciabatta bread? Do you want a rye bread? And then you just mix and match the items that you put in the sandwich, or maybe utilize leftovers. So there's so many things that you can do. Same thing with quesadillas. It doesn't have to be all about the cheese. You know, you can put a lot of veggies in there. You can use a whole wheat tortilla. You can use corn tortillas. You're getting a lot more nutrition that way. Serving it with a very healthy fat like avocado or a pico de gallo, which is just veggies. Instead of, you know, sour cream, you can use less sour cream, or you can even use the plain unflavored yogurt. So lots of ideas. Make your own pizzas and flatbreads. Foil pouch dinners are awesome. I raised two boys, they're 29 and 34, and they lived on these because they were always eating their second meal, you know, after dinner sometime. And I would put together little pouches that had either fish or chicken. One of the favorites was a chicken breast, a little bit of salsa. Bake that in the oven. You can put some veggies in there as well. You bake it in the oven like 400 degrees for 20 minutes. Pull it out. You can get really fancy and put some crushed tortilla chips, maybe some extra cheese on there. And, you know, it's a really simple way. It's sort of like a Girl Scout, Boy Scout camp out kind of meal. And then the same thing with lunches. Lots of different ideas. And that's all that is. And then, of course, snacks. You know, people like stress over snacks. And a snack is just an extension of a meal. It's just the most important thing is to manage it. So when I think about planning a meal or planning a snack, it's so important to think about what nutrients can I add in? You know, what food groups can I add to make it healthier? Because it's not about elimination, it's about adding things in. So I put together this idea for you tonight. I'd love for everybody to either come up or we can serve it. Has anybody had Swiss muesli? So it's really not a new item. I lived in Sydney, Australia for 2 years, and on the way, Qantas Airlines served this for breakfast, and I thought, oh, this is genius. I love oatmeal. It was so good. And so I asked, you know, how it was prepared, and you can actually find muesli in the grocery store. And the nice thing about this product that's already prepared that you can buy is it has the nuts, the seeds, the chia, it has dried fruit and the oatmeal. And it's already dry, so you can cook it like you would oatmeal, or like I did, I mixed it with yogurt, and then I shredded an apple, because I wanted the benefit of that flavor. I threw in a couple drops of orange juice, and then I let it sit overnight. So it's like cooking in the liquid. And then in the morning, I top it with a little bit more yogurt and maybe some fruit. And it really is a wonderful snack. Does everybody want to try it? My goal is to always feed people because that's kind of my thing. But when I think about this idea, it's giving me oatmeal, so there's a whole grain. I'm getting the dried fruit, which is a natural sweetener. I have my high in vitamin C and fiber fruit. You can add any fruit. You can use peaches when they're in season. You can put apples, anything that you enjoy. And it really is giving you almost a full meal. And this is about as much as I can eat, for breakfast. That would be enough for me because it's so dense and it's so rich. But I'm getting my dairy, from the yogurt. Because it's Greek yogurt, it's triple strained. It gives me extra protein. Protein is what you need for staying power. So if I were to just get up and eat fruit, or a fruit juice, my blood sugar is going to spike and fall. But when I have protein, it's going to keep my blood sugar regulated. I'm not going to crave food in an hour. So you need that protein at a meal. So something like this would be an excellent snack. And if you don't have the muesli, you can certainly even just do yogurt parfait with maybe some granola type cereal sprinkled on top to give you kind of a similar component. But every meal should have at least 2 or 3 food groups to complement nutrients. Every snack should have at least 2 food groups. So that's kind of what I always keep in my mind when I'm planning my meals. So my dietitian takeaway for you is nutrition that you can live with. Okay. When people go on diets, the last thing that you ever want to do is do something that's temporary. People go on diets and then they go off diets and they've made no improvements. It's all about your behavior. So if you want to make changes, pick one thing, just one, and improve that, and then maybe work on something else. 9 times out of 10, it's not that people have horrible diets. It's usually that they've kind of gone down the wrong road in terms of behavior. Maybe they've gotten into the habit of driving through the donut shop in the morning, so maybe just pick one thing. Another really key phrase for me and most dietitians is all foods fit. Okay. I always tell my children, if I have a child that I'm visiting with, I always say, you can eat anything you want. There's only 2 things that you can't eat, and that's spoiled and rotten, right? Anything you want, you can fit it in, but you have to look at quantity. You have to look at frequency. You have to look at how it's prepared. Plan ahead. Even as a dietitian, I can't wing it. I have to really plan. I have to sit down on a Sunday before I go to the grocery store and just kind of sketch out, what am I going to eat for the week? Because if I don't have the food in the pantry and the refrigerator or freezer, what ends up happening? Uber, drive-through. Enjoy the pleasure of eating. This slide, I love this girl because she's having so much fun, and how many people I hear when I counsel them, they'll say, I wake up in the morning and my first stress is, what am I going to eat? They're constantly stressed about what am I going to eat because everything is so bad. So get back to enjoying the pleasure of eating. And the next one is make better bad choices. If I have nothing else and I'm driving through whatever restaurant, fast food, sometimes you have to make better bad choices. What's wrong with a grilled chicken sandwich as opposed to a fried? What's wrong with a small junior burger and a small fry as opposed to the triple patty that's oozing with cheese? Manage portions. It's all about portions. If I want, the whole big fried meal with a lot of sauces and gravies or whatever, I really, it doesn't give me much to work with the rest of the day. So it's about managing portions. Another thing I always like to say is make progress, not perfection. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect diet. We don't want to seek perfection, but you really have to, if you're trying to make changes, it's important to, you know, make some progress. There's a lot of things that we can do. Be mindful. You know, a lot of times we just eat because we're, you know, on the computer. We use our mouse pad as a doily for a sandwich. You know, it's not really healthy to be eating and doing something else. It's important to have a meal and really enjoy the pleasure of eating. So be mindful, you know, be one with your food. That's really important. And then you cannot talk about nutrition without talking about the importance of fitness, because they go hand in hand. I have a lot of clients that are runners, for instance, and they think, well, I run because I want to eat anything I want or everything I want. You cannot run your fork. You know, you have to really, you know, think about it. You have to really plan it, and you have to eat according to, you know, your performance level. But fitness is a big, big part of all this too, because as we age, and anyone over 35 is going to start experience sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting. So if you're not doing something to maintain muscle mass as you get closer to that age, you start, you know, reducing your weight or your muscle tone, and you no longer can eat like you did even 5 years earlier. So we all need to really think more about focusing on fitness. So covered a lot of ground, I know that, but I'd love to entertain any questions that you have. I'm done. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
On a previous slide, you said you had written down to replace garlic with garlic powder. Why is that?
Oh, you know what? It's whatever. You know, both of them are good. There's no reason for that. No, I mean, they both. I don't think you can exchange one for another as equal amounts. You know, and they both have different flavors. But I'd have to go back and look at the context of that. Anyone else?
I actually have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
First is, what are your thoughts about organic versus non-organic foods?
Okay.
And then any thoughts about genetically modified foods? And then what do you recommend regarding water consumption?
So let's start with water. You know, water is critical because our body is made up of, you know, more than 60% water. So you constantly have to replenish. Anytime you run low on fluid, you run the risk of having electrolyte imbalances, and that can affect your heart really easily. In fact, that's what happens to a lot of the elderly, you know, when they're maybe even living alone and they're having diarrhea issues, or they're, you know, throwing up, or they're not drinking a lot because they don't want to walk to the bathroom. That can really, you know, set them up for, you know, demise, really. When it comes to fluid, it's really a very important nutrient. It's one of the most important nutrients. So it aids in digestion, it helps with elimination, it keeps our core temperature regulated. So fluid is really, really important. But water is the number one, but you're also getting fluid from the foods that you eat. So I always like for people to realize it's not like you have to drink gallons of water, because you're getting it in your beverages. Think about some of your fruits and vegetables. Think about a zucchini versus a butternut squash. You know, you're getting a lot of water in some of your veggies. So when we talk about fluid, it's not just water. You know, this is a bone of contention for a lot of people. People love to debate organic, non-organic, GMO. Here's where a registered dietitian is coming from. We're looking at the world, and we're looking at the population growth, and we're thinking, how do we feed this population growth? When you're looking at organic versus conventional produce, a lot of people think it's better for me, and if I can't afford it, I'm not going to buy it at all. Okay, so that's what we hear as dietitians. The other thing is, you know, it's good for the environment. It definitely is good for the environment, but we won't be able to afford, you know, produce if we only buy organic. We won't be able to feed population growth if we only focus on organic. So if your budget allows, I say go for it. but don't get caught up in a trap. Like for instance, my focus is really more on promoting whole food. Like for instance, if I want mac and cheese, I'm going to get the whole grain noodles, I'm going to get the cheese, I'm going to use the whole ingredients. I'm not going to buy a certain brand of organic mac and cheese that's highly processed. So people get caught up in the word organic thinking it's better for, and no study has ever proven that it's more or that it's nutritionally advantageous. So, and especially as college students and, you know, anybody these days. I mean, anytime you go to the grocery store, I used to be able to take a sack home for $50. Now it's $150 for 2 people. You know, so it's important to eat the produce. It's important to eat the whole grains and not worry as much about the organic and non-GMO. But we know people are really gravitating to that because places like Walmart and some of the more affordable stores have a bigger selection of that. But I think it's important to just, you know, understand where it fits in. You know, it's better to get the produce than not get it. I had a client, I always have to tell this story. I had one client who said, I only buy food at a certain grocery store because that's all they carry. And I always like to get to the why. And I said, well, why do you think that's important? And he said, because I don't want to have to wash it. Okay, food safety is a whole other issue, right? Food safety is a whole other issue. It has nothing to do with organic. So it's important to, you know, get to the root of why people are, you know, why they have a certain habit in terms of shopping. So it's, you know, it's personal preference really. Same thing with the non-GMO. I mean, we could beat that horse for a long, long time. But, you know, if you're a diabetic and or a person with diabetes and you rely on insulin, that was a genetically modified organism. You know, we wouldn't be able to control diabetes if we didn't, you know, utilize that method of farming, agriculture, whatever, you know, that it's another tool in the toolbox. So I hope that answered the question.
I think so. There was one other question in the chat, and it's, in addition to reduced portion sizes, do you suggest altering the frequency of eating, such as no meals late in the evening?
Okay, so, you know, intermittent fasting is a really popular kind of way to control weight and eating. Everybody gets a certain calorie budget. I like to compare that to your budget when you go to the mall. You know, if you go to the mall and you don't know what your budget is, you can get into trouble big time. It's the same thing with calories, right? So if you use up all your calories before evening, you shouldn't eat after 7. But if you haven't eaten your calorie allowance for the day, what's the difference if you eat it at 9 or at 9 at night or 9 in the morning? You know, it's better to space it out because of those blood sugar issues. You know, whether you're diabetes, you have diabetes, or whether you have hypoglycemia, your body is kind of requiring some nourishment. You know, it's kind of funny to a dietitian when you're watching TV and they'll have a Snicker bar commercial, like, grab a Snicker bar for energy. Well, what's the energy value of a Snicker bar? You know, or how about a Monster, or how about a cup of coffee? You're not getting energy from that. There's no calories in that. You know, it's better to have a healthy snack. So, you know, it really is, the timing of our meals is really personal. If you are a bodybuilder, you may need to have 6 meals a day because you can't consume the amount of calories you need at 3 meals. So you might have to have 6 meals a day or even more. If you are a person with diabetes, and especially if you're taking insulin, it's very detrimental to your health if you don't space out your meals properly. So, you know, timing is so critical, but it's also very personal. But I think that people who tend to be busy and skip all day, and then the minute they get in the house, they're like, you know, just going after it, like snacks and chips and, you know, whatever is quick and easy, that's not a healthy way to go. So a lot of ways to look at that. Any other questions? Yes.
This was really sweet. I was surprised. I thought maybe there was like Greek yogurt, you know.
Well, okay, so you know what? I always do that. I always get the vanilla flavored instead of the plain unflavored when I do groups because some people just have an aversion to that. I think it's sweet also. So I like the plain unflavored, because when you eat something like this, it already has dried fruit in it. That's a natural sweetener, but you're getting so much nutrition from it. So I agree with you. There's no added sugar per se. This one, let's see, this one has 15 grams of sugar and 3/4 of a cup. Here's another thing that kind of throws people off. When it's a dairy product, part of that sugar is actually the lactose, which is milk sugar, that's in this product. So it's not like 15 divided by 4. It's not like 4 teaspoons of sugar. It's, you know, it's lactose, which is also giving you protein. You're getting vitamin D and calcium. So that's why the new labeling is suggesting that we look at the amount of added sugar. And that's what doesn't come in nature. You know, I have a feeling we skipped through some slides when I was doing that. I don't remember doing it, but I had a picture about labels, and I don't remember talking about it.
I don't remember you talking about it either.
Yeah, so I think there were a few slides that kind of, you know, got swiped a little bit too much, but labeling is something that we all need to look at a little bit more. And the government, even though we have our issues with government, you know, we have the safest food supply in the world, and we also are really trying hard to educate people, but you know, there's still a lot of confusion. But added sugar is one thing that we really should look at, just because it sneaks in really quick and easy. Any other questions? Did you find it helpful today? Okay.
I would like a business card or if you something of that nature,
Okay.
just to be following up.
Okay, you know what, I didn't bring it in today, but I can certainly give you my information. Plus, I'm probably in the directory, because I'm an adjunct faculty member here. Yeah. But, and we're raffling off my book. Do you want to pick a name?
First of all, has everybody put their name? I think you came in late. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
So the Dash book is every year in January, the